ready or not, here he comes. Quake with fear, you mortal fools! Bow down before the awesome might of this huge guy who's carrying the real contestant.
If you're clicking on this video, then I can almost guarantee that you don't like Skull Merchant. Pretty much everyone hates this character, and I'm no contrarian in this case. This character is an absolute train wreck in almost every conceivable manner. Now, I'm aware that she's been talked about to death, but I honestly just wanted to make a video on this because I just have this channel as a hobby and thought it'd be fun to make a video on the topic. Plus, I mean, look at this shit. Alright, so the main thing everyone hates this bitch for is her god-awful visual design. And yeah, this is a clusterfuck. There's no way around it. I mean, just look at this shit. How the hell was this approved? It's a Call of Duty reject. What the hell is this doing in Dead by Daylight? The biggest issue with her design has to be the mask. It makes no sense from a visual or tactical standpoint. A badass or scary mask on a killer is a staple of the horror genre. I mean, hell, Michael Myers, Ghostface, Leatherface, all have masks that make you go,
I gotta get out of here!
This isn't just because the actual mask is uncanny or intimidating. Masks also make us subconsciously wonder what is underneath, letting your imagination go wild. Dead by Daylight is of course no stranger to masks. I mean, the poster boy of the game wears one. Now, there's many problems with Skull Merchant's masks, but I think the biggest issue with it has to be the fact that, while wearing a mask, it doesn't completely cover up her face. Now, it's pretty obvious why this was done, since behavior prioritized her being attractive over her being scary. It comes off like a last-ditch effort to make the character seem to be less of a jump-the-shark moment than she actually is. The results, of course, has led to nobody being happy with what we got. The thing is, though, her face being partially revealed could have been a good idea. Like I said, the reason masks are so common in horror is that they let the imagination run wild. By giving us a small hint of what her face looks like, they could have planted the seed of something more horrific that is hidden by the rest of the mask. Perhaps make her a burn victim, or have ugly-looking scars, or set up in her lore that she's missing a jaw or something like that. Hell, that could even be why her mask seems to value being classy and beautiful over actually fulfilling its purpose of protecting the eyes and lungs from danger, as a way of compensating for her unattractive appearance. At the same time, though, I think this whole part of the design is just bad. Gas masks are really cool in my opinion, and they have boatloads of potential to be scary. There's a reason why Nurse has multiple cosmetics featuring one. But diamonds on a gas mask? A tool used for protecting against toxic gases and harsh elements? It's not just impractical, but it's just goofy. But of course, a shitty mask is just the start to this shitstorm of a design. Let's focus on what you see during gameplay. On one hand, you see a giant, admittedly pretty cool looking blade, but for some reason, it is duct taped to Skull Merchant's arm. Like, for someone who, according to her lore, has done this countless times, you'd think she'd have something a little bit more stable. I mean, shit, that's gotta hurt for her to take on and off all the time in order for this bitch to somehow take over companies and kill their CEOs over and over. Not to mention that the blade has to be pretty heavy and would be at risk of dismantling at any time she uses it, but it's duct taped because reasons. I don't know, it's probably something in dark Brazilian manga. Anyways, you glance over to her other arm, which you have to, as it's shown when you use her power. And she's got these absolutely gorgeous fingertip cone things. I don't know what these even are, but admittedly they're quite pretty. But not only would this make using her tracker more inconvenient for her, since she's supposed to be an
apex predator,
but the fashionable fingertip jewelry does not go well with the very industrial blade applied with duct tape. Her whole visual appearance seems to be two very clashing things. She's supposed to be a mechanic, but also very beautiful and classy. Of course, actual people are multifaceted and shit like that, but for someone who's just supposed to be an imposing serial killer, these decisions just make you confused. If they wanted to show that she's a ruthless millionaire, why not some more classy attire with rips and blood in it, with a more professional and futuristic setup for her blade? Just because she's supposed to be smart with machinery doesn't mean she has to wear grubby mechanics overalls when she's hunting. And it wouldn't make much sense for someone who's supposed to be an
apex predator.
Apex predator.
Apex predator.
We're super proud of the content of Tools of Torment, and we can't wait for you to experience it in Dead by Daylight.
Of course, I think the ideal outcome of this idea would be the mechanic aspect being the focus, as it's, in my opinion, more generally intimidating. This clash in design just screams rushed, honestly. Then, what is probably the most controversial aspect of her design would be her sex appeal. I, along with most people, think that any killer in this game should be scary. I don't think having a killer that's attractive is an issue, but the main issue that lies with Skull Merchant is that they are sexy first, scary later. Twitter would like to convince you that, actually, Skull Merchant isn't sexualized. It makes complete sense lore-wise for her to unbutton her shirt to reveal hella titties. I mean, just look at what's presented to you in the actual trailer. This is your first shot in your reveal for the new scary killer? Like, what? Yeah, she's drilling shit into a skull, but I don't think anyone can honestly say that's the first thing they noticed in the trailer. I mean, look at how she walks in game. What is this stage strut? Her heels aren't even touching the ground. Was she meant to be wearing high heels at one point and they just forgot to change it? Hell, just look at her cosmetic when she got released. This is what we got. I honestly thought that Behavior's goal when she was initially revealed was to have a purposely bad design so you'd buy an actually cool robot skin for her, but nope, here's a skin that makes her look like a cyberpunk stripper. Behavior might as well have included a part of her lore where Johnny Silverhand gave her a 20 for a blowjob. Her ass cheek is hanging out. What the fuck is this? And then she got 2 new skins as well, both of which are more modest for sure, but I mean, really? In this one, she's wearing a tight dress with high-up thigh slits, and the other one confirms that she goes braless. And I can honestly consider this one to be her only decent cosmetic, as it's at least somewhat scary. And what do you know, it's the one where she's the least sexualized. The last part of her visuals I wanted to discuss was her Mori. I honestly don't mind this Mori. It's not my favorite by a long shot, but it was improved significantly from the initial PTB. I like the focus that is put on her perversely touching the survivor. It implies that she enjoys the idea of murdering, which is actually creepy and is done somewhat subtly. If more of her was like this, I think a lot more people would like her, but alas, it appears that this was just a fortunate accident done by Behavior. But, even though as soon as she was revealed after an interesting teaser trailer that made us think we'd get something completely different, I think this could have been forgiven by many people, as long as she had a fun and balanced power. Skull Merchant's power sucks. It's boring, it's literally just the boring part of Artist, but you can also put your drones at generators. You do have a pretty cool in-depth tracking ability, which sounds really cool, except it has 2 major flaws to it. The most important being that despite all this information you can receive, rarely are you able to actually do anything with it. You can place a drone at Killer Shack on Cold Tower, but unless you're already near the shack, you'll get nothing out of that. You can start to trek over there if you aren't already preoccupied, but the 3% haste status effect you'll get from a survivor disarming your trap and being trackable isn't even close to enough to achieve the map control this character desperately needs. Because other than the ability to know where you are, she has no power, other than the small haste boost and the ability to lock down generators, so repairing them is a hassle for survivors. Of course, her ability to drag out games has been the main talking point of her from the community, so I don't feel the need to go that far into this, but her entire design is flawed from the start. She's what's known as a power creep character. Now, she's definitely not DBD's first. The main ones the community might point to would be Clown, Knight, and possibly Old Freddy. These characters have flawed designs that are, to a degree, weak on purpose. The reasoning for these being weak on purpose is because the design simply does not work on a mechanical level for the game. So, instead of the design being scratched before release, the developers will just make the character very safe, numbers-wise, or they will have numerous limitations imposed on them. Clown would be quite good if his battles hindered more, but considering the lack of counterplay to him that isn't leave the loop, he's stayed as essentially the same sorry killer ever since release, despite his rework. Knight would be a much stronger killer if his guards chase for longer, allowing him to divide pressure, but they can't do that due to his flawed design. There's the banner that's placed that completely negates his power when a survivor touches it. Survivors get to tell what the detection radius of guards is, so they can't be forced to interact with them outside of chase. If you hit the survivor a guard is chasing, the guard deactivates, and you can't choose which guards to use at any given moment due to the fact that Carnifex is basically the best character to spread pressure with. There's a lot of similarities between these characters and Skull Merchant here. Survivors can see exactly where the drones are so they don't get even a smidge of progress from being exposed mid-chase, of course with the progress depleting over time, plus the only downside to being in the drone radius is giving the killer the slight haste buff, which don't get me wrong, haste is a strong effect that is seldom used for a reason. The only issue is that you can just leave the drone area. You can't stack them on top of each other, and the radius is too small to be generally effective for this tactic, so what do you do every single time? Leave the loop. How exciting! Something that did genuinely seem interesting to me when I saw what the power did was that the drones could be used so you could be stealthy. Unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, the radius of these drones is incredibly small. I've tried and tried and tried, but playing Skull Merchant as a stealth killer just does not work. Your drones get disabled before you can use them at another point to sneak up. The radius also feels much too small to be able to traverse easily, and lastly, the amount of time that you may remain undetectable after leaving the radius is so minuscule it may as well not even exist. So, as everyone was disappointed with the lackluster killer design and power, there was one thing everyone was hoping for at least. At least one genuinely really good killer perk that would provide something interesting for the killer side. Did behavior deliver? What do you think? Why would I bring this up if the perks were good? I remember when the PTB came out, it was somewhat agreed upon by the community that Thwack and Leverage were actually decent perks. But I honestly think that this was just people coping with the fact that everything about this killer sucks. These perks are not good. Let's look at Leverage. So, you have to earn tokens via hooking to slow down healing up to 50%, gaining a 5% debuff per hook. Sounds great. But, as per the usual behavior fashion, the perk has limitations which make it super safe, guaranteeing it can't be even the slightest bit too strong in any way. It's literally just an inferior version of perks like Sloppy Butcher or Gift of Pain, or even Coulrophobia. The issue is the fact that the debuff lasts for a mere 30 seconds, which is just pitiful. It's not even as good as the Mangled effect until you get 5 tokens. Sure, it can get stronger after that point, but it's only for short intervals, and by the time you have more than 5 tokens, you're probably already doing pretty good. Now, I get why they kept it this way, because if it was paired with Sloppy Butcher without a time limit, this combo would be disgusting. It would slow heals tremendously. To give some constructive criticism, I think that they could work with the 30-second limit. If they added a Nurse's Calling effect to the duration, allowing you to see any healing survivors while the perk is active, I think the perk could honestly be pretty good and create something unique enough to stand on its own. Survivors would either have to wait out the duration to heal, or risk being caught. If you're really worried about this being too strong, nerfing the numbers would be a good place to start. Honestly though, I think this would be more than fine. It could be an issue on a character like Nurse, but Nurse is the issue with that, not the perk concept. Then we've got Thwack. I hate this perk for the name alone. Why does it have such a stupid name? Come on, behavior, tell me. Anyways, the idea for the perk is not bad, although it is niche, but it doesn't even fulfill that niche well. When I first saw the perk, I thought it might be fun for characters like Nemesis or Leatherface who can break pallets quickly, but I was very disappointed when I broke a pallet right next to a survivor only for them to not scream or reveal their aura. I hadn't read the part of the perk that ruins it, that being that you can only use it once for every hook you get. Like I said, classic behavior cautiousness prevents this perk from being good. The most disappointing part about this too is that even if you break a pallet and nobody screams, the perk is still used up. Of course, nobody screaming is still information, but it feels awful to not hear any screams and still have your perk be used up, and that doesn't excuse this sorry perk for being so restricted. Just remove the hook requirement, and if you really wanted to, add a short hindered effect to survivors that scream while it activates. Lastly, we have Game Afoot. Easily the weakest perk of the bunch, but it's honestly my favorite. It's D tier at best for sure, but I really enjoy the concept for it. Again, it's sad to see a good perk idea be so restrained, especially for what little reward is gained from the perk. A mere 5% haste effect for 10 seconds doesn't deserve to be restricted to pallet breaking against one survivor. The most unique aspect of this perk is the obsession mechanic, which changes according to who the most chased survivor is. Unfortunately, it only changes upon injuring, so if you chase Dwight for 30 seconds with him as the obsession, then Meg for 29 and injure her then, she's not the obsession and will not be until you injure her again, downing her, and even though she's the obsession, you're not getting any value out of it, of course, because she's downed. It's simply flawed in that regard. I honestly think the injury to change obsession requirement should be removed because of this, and simply have it update whenever the survivor being chased fits the requirement of the perk. Honestly though, I think if you really want to make it meta, just ditch the obsession requirement altogether. This would be a great chase perk without all the limitations it has at the moment. Plus, it would pair greatly with Thwack, with or without my suggested changes. Now, with her perks out of the way, there's an aspect about her I'd like to discuss that I'm going to preface I am not an expert in. That being her music. I honestly really like her music. I find the drums pair really uniquely with the electronic machine sounds, and it has a good vibe to it that is genuinely somewhat intimidating. My only issue lies with the most important piece of her music, the chase. It just sounds incredibly repetitive. Is it chaotic? Yes. Scary even? A little, which, of course, is what you want for music for a killer in a horror game. Don't get me wrong, though, I'm not saying the recycled Apex model is scary, but the main chase theme feels like a few seconds of music on loop, which is especially apparent when you play as her, since that's the only music you'll hear. That's something I felt pretty strongly on with this game's chase music lately, but that's a video for another day. But yeah, it's definitely a pretty big downside to what I consider Skull Merchant's only positive asset, and it's a big one at that, considering the chase music is essentially the climax of the music. Now, the nail in the coffin. The final sting that made everybody, especially Pixelbush, loathe this chapter. The lore. I don't think I need to comment on this, but to summarize, little psychopath girl always wants to be the best at everything. Her dad writes manga. Her dad makes no money selling manga. Little girl grows up and makes manga website and becomes a millionaire at age 18 somehow. Dad goes out for milk and doesn't come back, so she wants to be like her dad's manga character and begins buying companies and killing the CEOs because she always wants to be the best, and she's in a jungle and for some reason some kite flyers to show up and all of a sudden she sees fog. Listen, now, I know that was like a very short, jokey synopsis of 17 or so paragraphs, but trust me, those 17 or so paragraphs do not elaborate on or make any more sense than what I just said. So, you're better off just going off of my version of the story, as it saves time, and is honestly better off because of the milk joke about the dad. The main issue with her lore is that it has no idea who it wants Adriana to be. Is she a selfish millionaire who wants to be the only person in financial power? Is she incredibly intelligent and thinks others deserve to be punished because of the supposed poverty she dealt with as a child? Or is she a manga-obsessed weeb who just has a very twisted way of trying to appease or roleplay her father's character? She's supposedly all three at once, which again, like I said earlier, people are multifaceted and all that, but I find it very unrealistic that a terminally online manga shill also knows how to create intricate mechanical weapons, how to infiltrate numerous corporations, and be able to cover up her tracks as she slaughters CEOs and liquidates their companies. Now, I've seen that some people really like her for what can be interpreted as her being, for lack of a better term, a girl boss. And if you feel that way, then good for you. But there are much better written and designed female characters to look up to, especially in horror of all places, and I find it surprising anybody would interpret her as anything other than poorly written. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if she was the result of one of the employees' daughters begging their parent to get their OC into the game under threat of running away if her Skull Merchant OC doesn't get added. She comes off as a massive rough draft that every employee of behavior was asked to add an element to, and nobody decided to put any thought as to how to make a cohesive story out of it. And that's just about everything I have to say about Skull Merchant. In conclusion, the Skull Merchant has a poor visual design that clashes and doesn't tell you what she's about. Her power is broken to the core, she has abysmally written lore and repetitive chase music. This character is my least favorite in all of Dead by Daylight, and all I can do is wish for this character to be completely changed into something that is at the very least tolerable. Will it happen? Yeah, probably not. Despite the amount of advertisement behavior has done for this chapter and the amount of skins Skull Merchant already has, she has a very small array of fans. I have a feeling once this rift passes, she will be forgotten and given the twins treatment. It's unfortunate, really. I, along with most people in the community, felt genuine excitement that day when the Tools of Torment teaser trailer released. We were all so eager to discover a new, thrilling killer with a technological theme. But alas, we are stuck with an ill-fated character that was doomed from her inception. Hey there, so, I just want to say, thank you so much for watching. I've been thinking about this topic for quite a bit now, and I just wanted to kind of get this off my chest, as I've been disappointed with the latest chapter since it released. After two major blunder releases, even though I admittedly like playing Night, I can't admit that I think for the health of the game that the upcoming anniversary really needs to be a home run for everybody's sake. But anyways, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.